Greetings, I'm Chuck Lennox. I am the coordinator of the Global Alliance for Heritage Interpretation, which is an organization of professional groups from around the world that support heritage interpretation in all its forms. I want to welcome you to our webinar series, Global Excellence in Heritage Interpretation. I trust you will enjoy these webinars from various member groups and from other speakers around the world. I think you'll gain a new perspective on heritage interpretation. Let's introduce our member groups.
Hello, my name is Jackie Lee and I am the chair of AHI, the Association for Heritage Interpretation for Britain and Ireland. And we are absolutely delighted to be part of the Gahi webinar series.
Hello from Interpret Europe. Our community is also happily contributing success stories to this Global Excellence webinar series. Lean back and enjoy.
Hi, my name is Kylie Christian and I'm President of Interpretation Australia. I would like to welcome you to this year's Global Alliance for Heritage Interpretations webinar series. We have a great group of discussions and presentations for you from all around the world, so I do hope to see you online.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Greetings to you all. My name is Nick and I am the chair of the Interpretation Network of New Zealand. We are a network designed to bring together interpretation professionals and showcase the best practice happening around our beautiful country of Aotearoa, New Zealand.
Hola, mi nombre es Antonieta Jiménez, soy fundadora y directora de Interpat MX, la Asociación Mexicana de Intérpretes del Patrimonio, una asociación fundada recientemente en 2019. Y a nombre de la Junta Directiva quiero transmitirles nuestro enorme gusto y entusiasmo de ser parte de esta alianza global.
Hello, bonjour, je m'appelle Jennifer Dick. I'm the chair of Interpretation Canada. We are a community that supports, engages, and inspires heritage interpreters across Canada.
Hi there, I am Paul Caputo. I'm the executive director with the National Association for Interpretation in the United States. We are so proud to be one of the organizing partners of the Global Alliance for Heritage Interpretation Excellence in Interpretation series. So proud to be part of this organization. Right now, 7 organizing partners from around the world. Thank you all for being part of such an inspiring and amazing profession.
Hi, I'm Tracy Cage, Executive Director of the Interpretive Guides Association, which is a Canadian-based interpretive guide training and certification organization, presently representing close to 2,000 certified members who work as interpretive guides, as educators, and as outdoor leaders internationally. We're proud to be part of the Global Alliance of Heritage Interpretation's family of professionals, and we're excited to explore the world of interpretation with you.
Well, good morning and good afternoon or good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Kylie Christian. I am with the Global Alliance of Heritage Interpretation and President of Interpretation Australia. I want to welcome you to the third webinar of this year in our series Global Excellence in Heritage Interpretation, which is hosted by Interpretation Australia this month. I would also like to acknowledge and welcome all Indigenous peoples joining us today and pay my respects to their ancestors and elders past and present. I am connecting to you today from the lands of the Burra, a people who are part of the Darug language group in the northwest area of Sydney. Before we get underway, I would like to let you know about our next webinar, hosted by the Association of Heritage Interpretation in the UK, titled Stromness Museum. And it's presented by Katie Firth, the Climate Change Exhibitions and Outreach Officer at Stromness Museum. This will be held next week, because we're giving it all to you in one big hit for August. And all the details and the registration link can be found on the gahi.online website under events. So please go along and register for that one. Today's webinar is titled Creating First Nations Community-Led Digital Interpretation at Murrook Culture Centre. This project is an award-winning project recognised by multiple excellence awards, programs, and their judges who are experienced professionals in the fields of heritage, culture, technology, and diverse visitors. As the webinar is underway, please post any questions you may have in the Q&A or in the chat, and we will monitor these and answer them at the end of the presentation if we have time. I am very happy to introduce you to today's speaker, Beata Kade, the Managing Director of Art of Multimedia. This is an interactive design studio which crafts compelling communications and immersive cultural experiences for enduring impact. Beata is Treasurer of Interpretation Australia and somebody I have worked closely with, and is a highly skilled interpreter and producer with over 35 years of experience in communications and over 20 years of experience creating natural, cultural, and built heritage interpretation. Specialising in strategic and conceptual development, leading a multidisciplinary team that has developed numerous award-winning films and digital projects right across Australia's diverse cultural institutions. May I introduce and thank you and welcome Beata.
Hello, Kylie. Thank you very much for that introduction. It feels like you've covered half the things that I wanted to say. So thank you to Gahi. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you all about creating Murrook Culture Centre's community-led digital interpretation. Thank you all for joining. I can't see you, but I hope someone's out there. I know many of you are joining at a sort of less than convenient time. Kylie, can I just check that you're seeing the right screen?
I can't see anything at the moment.
You can't see anything. Okay, let me just try that again. All right, okay.
Okay, I've got your desktop and there's your presentation.
Oh, hallelujah. Thank you. All right. So before I get into my talk, I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of Darug country, where I'm speaking from, and the Worimi country, whose culture I'll be talking about. But I also acknowledge all other traditional owners of the lands throughout Australia and beyond, where we collectively meet, walk, work, and live. As we're all part of humanity and therefore belong to country wherever we are, I thank them all for the care they continue to give country, and I pay my respect to their elders past, present, and emerging. I'd like to firstly quickly introduce myself just to give you a bit of context and frame my own perspectives. I was born in Poland, where I lived under the communist regime until my mother and I escaped as political refugees in 1980. We were lucky enough to end up in Australia, a country I fell in love with immediately. Well, after I got over the giant cockroaches and spiders. I loved the sky, the colours, and the vastness of the country. And in time, I fell in love with Australia's people as well. Soon, I also fell in love with a man, started a photography and video business, and with my husband in 1986, and had the first of my 3 children. Our business grew with our family and evolved over the decades, with technology primarily driving the change. We worked with government, large and small businesses, providing external and internal communications. And in 2005, we got a chance to work on our first interpretation project for the Rocks Discovery Museum. It was unusual and quite progressive in those days, I guess, to utilize that much multimedia in a small heritage museum. We discovered how much we loved interpreting heritage, and so it became really special for us, particularly as that was the first of the 17 Excellence Awards Interp projects received since then. And I'm only saying this to demonstrate my personal belief that when we love what we do and we are eager to learn more and deliver the best we can every time, we find ways to do it well. Storytelling, as you know, is as old as humans. Our First Nations people are a testament to that. And having come from broader communications to interpretation, I love it because it allows us to infuse authentic human experience without a sales or a political agenda, making it that much more meaningful. So today I get to share another special project with you and describe the journey of creating it, hoping it may inform some of your interpretive practice. So Murrook Culture Centre is a special project not only to the Worimi local Aboriginal Land Council and community whose culture it shares and with whom it was co-created every step of the way. It is special to our multidisciplinary team of creatives, technologists, designers, producers, cinematographers, historians, and other specialists who all contributed their expertise and their care to the project. It has been recognized as special by multiple Excellence Awards program judges, all experienced professionals in their respective fields of either heritage, culture, or technology, or all. But finally, the diverse visitors who engage with the results of our combined efforts also say it's a special place. Established in 1984, Worimi Local Aboriginal Land Council spent over 10 years dreaming, planning, designing, and building the Murrook Culture Centre at Williamtown. Murrook means a happy place in Gadang, and it was to serve as a central point of connection for their community, but also for knowledge and information for the Worimi people to share with visitors who can then explore the greater region with an appreciation of the Worimi and other traditional owners of the Hunter region. Murrook was envisaged as a collection and keeping place, a space for cultural demonstrations and performances, workshops with local artists and artists in residence programs. So essentially a gallery and a museum. The centre was also to be a venue to host varied educational groups and one that supports the training and business development for the Worimi people themselves around partnered activities catered for by the Worimi Cultural Heritage and Education Team and Sand Dune Adventure Social Enterprises. So you can begin to see how it had to be a very flexible, multifunctional space. The board wanted to ensure that the community could participate in developing the Murrook culture experience, as evidenced by Auntie Lorraine's words here. We, the Worimi, have not disappeared. We are still here and we continue to walk on this land today, even though colonization interrupted our stories and our languages. Both are still very much intact. Our stories are still remembered and shared, and this is our journey. In 2020, with the building pretty much completed, the Worimi CEO and board commissioned Out of Multimedia to provide interpretive consultancy and exhibition design services and subsequently implement the digital experience. Along with the newly appointed curator and museum director, Nicole Chaffee, a Biripi woman, who managed the entire digital project along with me on the client side, while also curating stories, sourcing content, and managing other build form, fit out, and many other aspects of the space. She was thrown in the deep end. With the curator on board, a curatorial vision was finalized, and this is the opening statement. The fundamental objective of Murrook Culture Centre interactive space is to act as a beacon of the belief that if one can experience Murrook, they can change forever. And while I won't read the entire vision, it is summarized by the project's intent, essentially, which was to develop a community-led, cutting-edge digital interpretation experience where elders personally welcome visitors, sharing intimate family stories and Worimi history, where we capture Worimi country in its splendor, and where large-scale interactive cultural stories immerse the visitor in Worimi culture and Gadang language. It took 3 years of multiple stages of ideation, design, and development, interrupted by 1 year break for COVID. The project stages were the design workshops and with the community, research and oral histories, followed by digital interpretation experience design and eventually specification, and the implementation. In stage 1, we conducted several rounds of Worimi board, elders and community meetings to gather preferences for themes and stories and proposed ideas and options for implementation. Prior to appointing us, the board went on a study tour around various cultural institutions, and so they had a good idea of some of the cutting edge stuff that was being done in Interp and what they liked and didn't like. But we needed to start with archival research of both the public archives and the Worimi's own Professor John Maynard's publications to gather interpretive resources and establish appropriate display content structure, thematic structure, and exhibition narratives that were specific to Worimi culture and place. So the results of this stage were the development of the interpretive themes of country, culture, and community. Over 40 cultural and historical stories were then shortlisted for development. And these include ancestral stories such as the first Worimi, the Mullet Run, and some others that you see here. Special sites such as Birubi Point, Dark Point, Soldiers Point, Worimi people, including interviews with 14 elders and community, Worimi activism, and contemporary stories such as sporting life, including football and elder Olympics. Focus on language was established as vital conduit through which culture is expressed and experienced, and that was definitely a must. Thus, the Worimi language, Garang, was planned to be recorded by Worimi people and incorporated into the experiences. This stage also included filming oral histories, mostly on green screen for maximum flexibility in future use, as we didn't know quite yet what we would be doing with them, and also to enhance the quality of their eventual final presentation. This was a significant cultural legacy component, which enshrined the stories from community into an enduring collection of Worimi heritage, allowing visitors to discover unique personal perspectives of life, growing up on Worimi country, the working and family lives of the Worimi people, of sporting and other achievements, the struggles and the triumphs. And vital to telling the community stories was capturing the voices and the image of the people, particularly as Worimi elders age and their health begins to fail. Recording of their oral histories became increasingly important for future generations of their own families, the knowledge wealth of their community, but also to add their voices to the Australian story at large. And these stories basically create the fabric of the museum that will yield an enduring digital archive of unique personal experiences and perspectives. Stage 2, the digital interpretation experience design, involved also multiple rounds of ideation, visual design, experience and interaction design, and the many options that actually resulted from the shortlisting in the workshops. Many ideas had to be explored, but some eventually discarded, such as a treasured Worimi artifact, the ancient fishing tree, which is displayed at the local Newcastle Museum, as it is very frail. Initially, the board wanted it brought back to Murrook to be featured in a central place within the centre, but moving it proved impossible without damaging it. So it was 3D scanned and we incorporated it into the Mullet Run exhibit. In the early design stages, further interesting ideas were brought about by various collaborators, and they all sort of can seem plausible, but when we test against environmental and operational requirements, such as light, sound levels, movability, and flexibility of exhibits, content development or hardware costs, they often need to change. And you actually have to take a lot of these ideas down a certain path before you can even make such decisions. Visualizations and prototypes helped all collaborators, including the CEO and board, to understand what would otherwise be a lot of complex technical descriptions and parameters. They also helped to specify and contain the functionality required, the multimedia functionality required to be developed, as well as the media that would have to be produced. So as the various options were budgeted, the board could then consider and ultimately allocate the budget for the components and the implementation that they wanted to see at Murrook. And these were not insignificant decisions, as the latest immersive hardware is really expensive. And so the CEO and board had to decide how far they wanted to push the innovation and immersion, as well as the content. So once all of that was approved, we produced technical and functional specifications, and the third implementation stage could begin. So stage 3 comprised hardware procurement and installation by a hardware partner, Command Digital, along with all the media production and the bespoke multimedia development, which were we filmed footage of country with a combination of drones and 360 cameras to take the visitor on an immersive tour of Worimi country in a way that reveals aspects of it that would take a very long time for any visitor to experience, often accessing sites that are special and are only accessible with a Worimi guide. 2 large curved walls were covered with 9 by 2.4 meters of flexible LED screens to form an interactive canvas on which country and culture were to be shared. And here you can see that they create a space that fully surrounds and embraces the visitor. So here we had 3 2-minute sequences of aerial films to immerse the visitor in Worimi country, the dunes, the river, and the coast. As visitors approach the walls, sensors trigger dynamic footage of the same environment, so either coast or whatever, but at a macro level, inducing a further intimate connection to country, increasing a sense of discovery, of seeing more and deeper than is visible at first glance. The sounds of country, including birds, whales, dolphins, are all incorporated into a composed music score, which also then included recordings by Worimi musicians. And this auditory level is as important and authentic as the footage itself. We produced the first Worimi, a cultural story created as a 2D animation, narrated by Uncle Graham, whom we filmed during the initial oral histories, who unfortunately passed since. Unlike some Aboriginal communities, his family in the Worimi were happy to have Uncle Graham tell this story through a channel he was a vital part in creating, though unfortunately he did not get to see it in person. This animation also incorporated Worimi children's artworks, which were of fish, which were created for this purpose during a workshop. For the second cultural story, the Mullet Run, we created photorealistic, real-time graphics delivered as a corner projection. So you've got interpretive storytelling in high-end 3D animation across 2 walls and a floor, which immerse the visitor in an interactive experience of the Mullet Run in 5 scenes representing it at the different times of the day. Visitors can play with the soldier crabs and help herd the mullet fish, which is what used to happen, which avoid the feet, or they can spot the hairy grubs and the koala as they listen to his mating call. The story is narrated both in English and Garang, or with Garang sounds, for which we recorded several community members. And the soundtrack is filled with authentic sounds of wildlife. In fact, we actually went and scanned a lot of the environment even further to get as much of an authentic experience as we could. I have a short video which will hopefully play. And if it doesn't, I've got a link, a QR code at the end of the presentation that you can have a look at it on our website. You can hear some of the soundtrack here. We also produced the documentary, The Rise of Worimi Local Aboriginal Land Council, around selected interviews to ensure as much as possible of the story was delivered by the Worimi people. A historian employed rigorous research methodologies, prioritizing corroborating evidence and reframing the colonial rhetoric when selecting data from the historical literature. And we followed standards of practice relating to Indigenous cultural and intellectual property and federal copyright legislation to ensure that Murrook acquired all the reproduction and transmission permissions, and we provided proper credit for all the content. Finally, the linking narrative was co-scripted and passionately narrated by the CEO, as we visualized this important story with a mixture of archival and community images as well as video footage. We also filmed elders and other community members, again, to warmly welcome visitors to Murrook in English and Garang via the welcome pillar, interspersed with images and names of Worimi special sites that they would encounter. We edited all of the personal family histories, which were filmed on green screen, as I mentioned in stage 1, into succinct stories that were delivered with selected country scenes in the background. These are available on the interactive story kiosks, of which they have 2, and there's room for many more stories, of course, as Worimi continue to create history. Captions were included to ensure the hearing impaired and other visitors to the sometimes loud space don't miss any of the meaning. And these kiosks also have analytics to inform the curator with actual data on which programs are most interesting to the visitors. We then programmed all of the multimedia kiosks, and including this multi-touch kiosk touch table, which houses the entire Worimi cultural photographic collection with captions and stories where appropriate and maps, and also additional videos that they had created over the years that supplement the personal stories that were told on the story kiosks. In multiple sessions throughout the production, we recorded, as I mentioned, the CEO and other community members delivering various scripted components for the various exhibits. We filmed the Worimi musicians performing songs and also playing their instruments, and all of that audio was used throughout all of the exhibits, giving it cohesive soundscapes. The recorded sounds of country were also combined into that, and they're all the authentic animals that we sourced. Programmed interactivity for the projection and LED walls. And these interactions also include directional sensor activated audio to engage the visitor in an active discovery of Worimi culture while minimizing noise when no visitors are present in the center. Because, as I said, being such a multifunctional space, it has a lot of ebb and flow with activations of different parts of the space. And finally, we developed a bespoke show control system to enable the curator to control and refresh the content as required. So whilst there's a programming that's been set and runs as desired, sometimes they need to change what's happening, or when they have visiting artists, they can design exhibitions specifically for either of the spaces, and this show control system enables them to change the programming. Now, I would like to say, but it was not all smooth sailing, of course. There were plenty of challenges caused by content delays. This was a big one, as Nicole was, as I mentioned earlier, performing several roles. There were inevitable decision delays, shifting deadlines that forced certain decisions that took us down to perhaps less than optimal path. There was hardware supply issues. We were doing all of this when there was a shortage of computer chips throughout the world. There were technical challenges, both on the software side and the hardware side of things. Sometimes hardware just doesn't work as advertised. And the many software components that we utilize don't want to play nice with each other, even though they should. Of course, that all tends to happen just when your deadlines are looming. And also individuals within this extended community had their personal views of how to implement certain aspects of this interpretation. So as the project advanced, this relationship of trust and respect became ever more important in navigating expectations, managing all of those challenges, and developing the best, most authentic experience we could offer within the project parameters. Here's what the CEO said at the public launch of Murrook in September 23. And I love this quote: "A culture is living. And what is living? Living is movement, evolution, change by design. So now we can call ourselves Abodigitals instead of Aboriginals." This is a great summary of the attitude the Worimi board and community had since we first started dreaming big with them. They knew that they were the original storytellers here. We were contributing our expertise to help them tell those stories in contemporary, innovative ways that engage the hearts and mind of their own community and the general public. This is not to say they did not appreciate everyone's contribution, quite the contrary. In fact, Auntie Lorraine looked at me in the eye and said one day, we need you. And this was not a project manager saying, you know, we need you to finish this project on time and on budget. This was a real heart-to-heart connection that I'll always cherish, which actually left me speechless at the time. For me, being adopted into the Worimi community makes this project extra special. Our team's cognizance and respect for our role developed this relationship, I believe. We were all the creative and technical instruments in the Worimi telling their own story. I think this is also why the award judges at the National Trust Awards felt it was outstanding. But what surprised me was that even awards primarily interested in innovative technology applications, such as the Innovate Asia Pacific Awards, recognize it as special amongst other projects with far greater scale due to the intention, the thought, and care demonstrated throughout the project's design, specification, and implementation. At the ceremony, they also said Murrook Culture Centre is exceptional. The project highlights how thoughtful AV can bring complex and rich stories and heritage to life in a wondrous way. This demonstrates that good interpretive process with authentic, collaborative storytelling, which includes the perspectives, skills, and creativity of many, resonates with people. It makes experience and communication meaningful and thus vital to enhancing the well-being of all people in the world. I have a really short 1-minute video of Andrew accepting the National Trust Award, where you can hear his perspective.
Hello, my name is Andrew Smith. I want to thank Evie, my dearly sister from Mito, for her wonderful welcome and acknowledge my First Nations brothers and sisters in the room. I'm a bit cheeky. I want to acknowledge all of my Second Nations brothers and sisters in the room too. Bless you. This award is, we've done what we've had the right to do for a long time. The blessing from our ancestors, our elders of today that supported this, our leaders of the moment and our future leaders. Culture and heritage are two separate things. Our culture is what we do. Our heritage is our intrinsic connection to our history, our past, our identity, our social, cultural and spiritual beings. We are part of the land. We don't own it. It is a part of us, which is Sparaba. I want to thank Art of Multimedia. I want to thank Nicole, our wonderful curator. And I want to thank, I've just lost for words, this is amazing. Thank you.
Okay, so here's a complete list of all the collaborators. Murrook, I feel, is one example where a small team made up of diverse, talented specialists combine their goodwill, focus, and striving for the best outcome within the inevitable constraints of the project. There are always constraints, with that of the Worimi team and community to create something special. It demonstrates the cultural legacy and value created when the world's First Nations people embrace innovative digital interpretive storytelling. This project was funded entirely through Worimi Land Council's own hard-earned resources, and therefore I feel it stands as a beacon of self-determination and success through collaboration for all marginalised communities in Australia and beyond. Thank you very much all for listening, and I'm happy to take any questions now, or you can contact me on this email anytime. Thank you.
Fantastic stuff, Beata. Thank you so very much. Absolutely. Hats off to you for that very engaging presentation. Whilst I wait for some people to contemplate what they might like to ask, I had a couple of questions just in terms of a few operational things, just interested to know sort of how you dealt with some things. How long did it actually take you to collect the actual the video and sound component of this project, because it was such a big part of it? You know, like, what is a reasonable amount of time for somebody to think about allowing in their project to do this?
Yes, I mean, this is always the biggest trick, because often you're even when you're specifying, you say, okay, do you have content that you can give us? This was the case in here, where they had some past content videos that we thought we would be able to use for a lot of their presentations. In the end, a lot of it couldn't be done. So then we had to suddenly change tack and go and capture it. So it really, there's no answer for that, because it is so project dependent. We ended up with probably 5 different rounds of filming sessions, as well as recording sessions, as well as both on site as well as inside. Luckily, having a big visitor center that was still not open, we had spaces to set up temporary studios and bring everyone there to do it. So there's no easy answer for it, but it can be quite a time-consuming exercise and could be quite expensive depending on how well you want to do it. I mean, we're all lucky that drones are a lot cheaper to get aerial shots now than it used to be with expensive helicopter shots. But even so, it's a big effort, and often weather dependent. So I'm sorry I can't give you a good answer, but I would allow some months for that, depending on the community. Depends on who you're filming. If we were doing other content where a whole group of people was scripted, it would have even taken longer because you have to gather everyone and they have to deliver certain things. So yeah, it's a big process.
Fantastic. Further to that, then, in a lot of these projects, especially in more government settings or in more formalized learning centers like museums and things like that, there was, after the implementation, there is a process of gathering feedback measures and things like that for the process of understanding how successful certain things were. And I have no doubt this is massively successful. I've heard nothing but great things about it, and I'm planning a trip up there in the not too distant future to go and have a look myself. But just in terms of those measures that we need to try and put into place, was that discussed as part of this project?
It wasn't, to be honest, and it's something that I'm sure they'll want to do once the project has a chance to get up and running. In fact, in some ways, they have been sort of a victim from what I'm in touch all the time with the team. They've been a victim of their own success in that they've got so much demand that they can't fit all the different groups in, because they're already a multi-purpose center trying to meet the community's needs as well as external needs. There's a lot going on in there. So the exhibition and the interpretive experience is only a part of that. So at this moment, this is why it was important that we gave them analytics for at least the multimedia content, because it informs what's happening right there. But there's a lot more happening that's a lot broader that can't be captured just with that. And I think whilst they want to, they will no doubt do some proper measurement. It's a kind of a low priority at this moment because they can see how busy and in demand the place is, and they can hear the comments directly. Unlike a lot of the larger institutions where there's a disconnect between people who are planning and measuring, etc. Here, it's a very small team that literally hears the perspectives, hears input, sees how many people are coming. So it's all very much more, present and obvious to everyone. But I know that they'll want to do it, and I've got some people I can recommend for them, of course, just as you know.
Fantastic. Now, could you just unshare your screen? And I have a question for you, just so that people can actually see you.
Yeah.
And we'll make sure that you are the highlight. Question was, what was the most interesting challenge that you had in the partnering process?
That's interesting. It's an interesting question. I guess this was the first time we worked directly with the owners, I suppose, of the center, of the venue. Unlike, usually it's a government department that we're working through, and there's a certain process that I'm quite familiar in working with governments. So a lot of it was trying to understand how they approach it. It was a very personal thing for them, which kind of aligned with what I liked, because I've got a very personal approach and put a lot of that on the line. But sometimes I wondered, is it all going to go down the way it's meant to? We don't have huge contracts like we have with governments. Is it all going to work out, particularly as we got more and further into what ended up growing to be a bigger and bigger project? I wondered, what if they just changed their mind and they so there was a little bit of that uncertainty in it being a different relationship. But with every, meeting, we realized that those relationships we were forming were really personal, and they were really, this was the real deal. There was no bureaucracy getting in the way. And we were lucky in that both the CEO and Nicole managed all of their stakeholders, as you can imagine, with such a large community of people, partnering in the outcomes. There was a lot of this, disparate ideas and sometimes conflicting opinions. And so we were lucky in that both the CEO and Nicole managed most of those for us. We just had to supply the evidence of why certain action or process would be better than another, and they could get agreement. So that was great, getting those decisions. But often, even with them, as we would come back with another iteration, they might have some other ideas that they've thought of at the time since then, and they would be all great. But of course, you can't keep on expanding a project parameters forever, or you'll never get launch anything. So
Very
I
true.
think that was tricky.
Fantastic. Look, it's been fantastic. Oh, one last question has just popped in. So for sites with very little budget, do you think that there can be a smaller scale project that have as impactful and as impressive response?
Oh, absolutely. Look, I mean, technology is not everything. I think the technology can be impressive, I guess, but it can also be disconnecting. I think really that element of authenticity and finding ways of connecting with people. I mean, what technology does in some of these instances here at Murrook is that it allows you to kind of have that connection with the people. But in other centers, when you maybe don't have the tech, but you've got the people, you can have the real connection with the people, still train them up and still give them the parameters. So, there's always lots of ways. And I've never done a project that's the same twice, as much as I'd love to have a sausage factory, it just doesn't work. So I think every venue can find ways of imbuing that authentic difference and point of view that's special about them. And often what's often tricky, and I understand that it's tricky for organizations, is like, how much money do you need? You don't know how much money do you need. You may not have much, and you need to get the money once you know what you're doing, but you can't. It's like the chicken and egg thing. You've got to do a whole bunch of work to even figure out how much money is needed or what technology would be needed. So I would really just say, find the company that you trust based on whatever parameters you've determined. And talk with them, and always do that discovery design aspect first, because you cannot get any decent quotes or accurate, estimates of anything until you've done that. And then trust them to deliver the rest. And tell them, look, we've only got, X, Y, Z for this. What can that buy us? What could you do if it was more? I think treating your suppliers as partners, rather than, which, like I said, I think with Worimi being their own stories was particularly close. We're not just you don't just have people who will just come in and do their thing, take their money and go. I think most of us in this space, want to do the best we can with whatever budget you have. So it's a matter of, don't be shy saying that's all we can give you. What can we do with that? And what's the best way of doing it? Because I'm pretty sure everyone wants to deliver that best outcome for whatever budget you've got available.
Absolutely. And I think that's the beauty of interpretation, isn't it? That you can create different experiences, no matter what the budget, no matter what the space, it all comes down to your ability to think outside the box and work with the resources you have, but then push beyond those and get the more out of people that, get taken on that journey with you. So
absolutely. And I think if I can say one thing, it's easy to get enamored with the technology itself, and we always have new tech coming out. But often, it's a fad, and sometimes people come to me and ask me, "Oh, let's do, virtual reality or augmented reality." Those two in particular, I find are particularly tricky to get really good value out of for the amount of resources you have to either invest in creating and maintaining, and in the case of VR, where you have to have enough people to help visitors manage it, where you have to have high quality 3D assets to even have the experience, or where augmented reality will show you stuff, but maybe not in as good a form as a good video would in an instance where you're outdoor and you can't even see screens. So don't get caught up by the tech. Really focus on the story and the experience. How can you convey it? And then if you've got the money, you can do things with the tech. That's fantastic. And I think so. If you talk to people, your technologist advisors with that, and the story is paramount and the connection is paramount, you'll get a good outcome.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. We've got one very quick question, if you would, before we finalise, which is around the types of analytics that you and or your client would use or look for in analysing the outcome and impact of the visitor experience. So when you talked about you were giving them analytics, can you just briefly tell us what sort of things that we could look for and others could look for in setting this up for themselves?
Yeah. So a lot of the systems that development designers and developers will use now come with analytics package. The software has changed the way it's delivered, so they will have how many interact, and you can program these for specific multimedia that you create. So whenever we create, we use Intuiface, which has an analytics backend, and don't believe them when they say you can do it without any tech information. You can't. They're not that useful. But anyway, you can get good analytics about how many times people access the story. So if you've designed your multimedia in a way, you can see, oh, okay, everyone loves this story, and you can let that, or they spend that much time on that particular component versus another. So there's those kinds of analytics in terms of interactions. And that it's kind of similar to, I guess, to what your website will give you in terms of online engagement in various components. That's the automatic. Then there's other things where you can measure, how many people walk through. You can set up sensors and all kinds of measuring devices that tech now provides, like, actually scanning people and seeing what they do. But that's kind of full on. And I don't know that most of you would be interested in that. But there is more and more ways of seeing what your visitors are doing. But again, design them for what it is that you want out of them. Because a lot of times you can, you just have to be clear what will make sense. And sometimes you don't know that until you've actually designed an exhibit and okay, what do you want to know? Do we want to know whether anyone plays the video, or do we want to know how many times the other things were accessed, or what is it that we want to know? And most of the time you can tailor those.
It's that good old adage, you don't know what you don't know until you don't know it. So
yes, that's right. Which is why it's so difficult to answer a lot of these questions when you're so early in the project. And it's not that you're trying to be evasive, just like the client isn't trying to be evasive, but none of you know anything yet. So
yeah, very true, very true.
Yeah.
Well, once again, I'd like to take this opportunity to say thank you so much, Beata, for showcasing such a wonderful project. I think it's set the bar very high for the next lot of people to do their next projects. So I think that's a wonderful thing for interpretation in Australia. And I want to thank everybody for joining us in this webinar. I really appreciate you coming along and supporting what is a fantastic initiative by the Global Alliance. And we do hope to see you at the next one, which will be next week with our British counterparts in the UK. So thank you again, and goodbye.